Welcome. I'm glad you're here with us today. I have Jennifer Godwin, who is a wife, mother, and grandmother of three. She is also the author of Go Make Ripples. And Jennifer and I have connected through Facebook. We've actually been chatting for quite a while just about being writers and book promotion. And I've gotten to watch her really share a lot about her book, not because she's seeking a ton of sales, but because she really believes in the message of her book and she wants to get that out there to those readers who can benefit from it. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your story, about your book. And I know one of the things that you said that you would love to talk about is the lessons you've learned from launching your first book. So if you can just tell us a little bit about how your book came to be and that process, and then go into those lessons.
Okay, well, I never planned on being an author. I was a photographer for 24 years with my own studio, and God asked me to write a book. It was nothing that I had chose. It was nothing I had planned on doing or was in my wheelhouse. Uh, nope, nothing about it said, yeah, let's do that. But I wanted to be obedient to God, so I sat and wrote my book. But as I was getting closer to being finished, my son said, well, how are you going to get this out there? How are you going to market it? I didn't know, he just kind of threw a couple things out there.
Right.
So, I was just thrilled to be getting close to being done. I had to figure out um, how to get this finished printed and get it, who the printer was going to be. And, there were so many decisions to be made during the whole thing that I was just thrilled to be done. And I just thought once I got done and I sent it off to the publisher, I thought, I'm just done.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where it starts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it was, when it came back out, I had a friend that when I was getting closer to being done, I had been in her store and she said, "Well, if you want to do a book signing in my store, I'll let you do that." Which I thought, a book signing. I don't know. Do you do book signings? Do people do, you see it on the Hallmark movies, but
Right.
you don't think everyday people do it. So once I sent it off and it was in being printed, I got in contact with her and I said, "Well, do you still want to do?" Oh, oh, Tracy.
That's okay. I can cut all that out.
Okay, so I didn't. So I contacted my friend and she said, "Yes, let's sign up a book signing." So we did, and the problem was when my book came out, it was just towards the end of COVID.
Hmm.
There were people shortages, there were paper shortages. And when I ordered, it was like in March. Of course, you prepay. And this was like in June that I was going to be doing
Oh,
my,
wow.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
And I would get one little box and I'd get, maybe five or six. And then I finally got a book of 30 and I'm like, well, do you do a book signing with only 30 books? I don't, so I didn't know. I didn't know how it was going to work. And and let's back up just a little bit more. When I ordered books, I didn't know what the I didn't know what I didn't know. I know a lot more now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
a
And that's
lot
why
more.
you're here to share with all the
And
newbies who, yeah, can use that
so,
information.
and you can't rely on other people to help you out. I mean, that's what I like about this group. I've learned so much just from being in this group of yours.
Good.
And so God told me how many to order, and I did. Well, come to find out, that was a huge amount of books to order when I ordered.
Yeah.
And so we went ahead and did the book signing. We had enough, there was enough to do it. But that kind of started, okay, now what am I going to do? How am I going to get this done? And
Mhm.
again, they were just kind of trickling in. We had my book is all about sharing the gospel with others. It's about giving Christians ideas on how to, just make ripples for God.
Yeah.
And there was an evangelistic seminar that was going on in our area. Unfortunately, I didn't know about it until the last minute.
Mm,
And uh, I was going to be out of town and I could only get so many books because I wanted to take some of them out of town with me.
right.
But I left a few here for them, regardless. But, you just kind of, the biggest thing I learned is that follow God's leading.
Mm,
God, where do you want it? What do you want me to do? Anything that sounds weird, I pretty much know it's probably from God.
yeah.
And so if he puts somebody in front of me, if he if there's somebody in front of me, some opportunity happens, something, I go ahead and, all right, I will do it. So that's kind of where we went. We went with book signings, and let me tell you, when nobody knows who you are,
Hmm.
I did it in my hometown, but when you go out of town, it's not like the Hallmark movies. There aren't people lined up outside the door.
Yep.
And honestly, I've told a lot of people this. It's more like a Girl Scout cookie table. People walk by, and if they don't look at you, they don't have to talk to you. They don't
Right.
have to buy your book. They
Yeah.
don't have to interact. So it is a little bit awkward. You have to know going in that you are going to be the one that has to initiate conversations. You have to be the
Mm.
friendly one. You have to be the one that says, "Hey, what do
Yeah.
you think about this?"
Absolutely. And I think that what a lot of authors don't understand is how much effort really is on the author when you do a book signing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
bookstore is probably going to put up a flyer, they're going to have it posted, but beyond that, there's very little advertising. Unless you're a celebrity with a big book publisher that has, a lot invested in your book, you're not going to have a media team or a marketing team. You probably will have a handful of friends that will share, but it really is in our world inundated with events and information and commercials constantly. It really does take a lot of putting things in front of people over and over and over again. And that's something I've had to learn because I'm like, oh, well, I put it out there. Like, I don't want to bug people. But really, the old stat used to say 7 times that people had to see something before they acted on it. And now it's between 20 and 30 because we are just bombarded constantly. And so it would be nice if, book signings were unique and people were like, oh my gosh, I'll get to meet an author. But I don't think that type of draw is still there. And then as a Christian author, we have the challenge of, we're definitely a niche market where I've been in events where, um, because I've done some book signings, but I've also done like vendor events. And you can see people like purposefully walk like on the other side of the aisle and away. So, yeah. So what type of bookstores have you focused on? And have they required you to offer your book in the store? And then a follow-up question to that would be, what do they ask from you, like percentage wise or a cut from all of the book sales?
Okay, I'm in a unique situation and I don't really have to make money doing this. And I really value small businesses.
Yeah.
So my first book signing was a gift store, which honestly, I think a gift store works just a little bit better because you're not competing with 1,000 other books behind you.
Right. Makes sense.
It's you and your book. And so when I did it, I let them make the profit off of it. I just wanted to cover my costs, and I made 50 cents a book is basically what I made.
Okay. Okay.
So not getting rich being an author here.
Right.
Um, it's, and like I said, it's more of a mission to me. And so, I, nobody's ever required anything of me of, doing that kind of thing. If I was to do it again, now that was, I haven't done a book signing for a very long time. If I was to do that again, I would contact, being a Christian author, I would contact like the churches, and
Mhm.
I would have them, I would reach out to different churches in the area and try to talk to somebody that might be the most outgoing person in the church to get them to bring maybe a group of people just in
Okay.
support of me and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So then that creates a little bit more of a buzz,
Right. That's a
but
great idea because you're not really asking the church per se to do anything
right,
or support, because most authors are looking for, some profit to make some money off their book.
right,
Which
right.
even when you're not sharing that royalty with a bookstore, it's not a ton. I think that always surprises people when I have that conversation with them. But I love that idea and just letting churches know, hey, there's a local Christian author, there's a book event. We would love to have your parishioners come out and then trying to make contact with that, like you said, that one person who's outgoing and really good at gathering people. I love that idea. That's so creative.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and let me tell you, it just kind of popped in my head, but that would be
Yeah.
definitely what I would do.
Yeah.
I would reach out to at least 5 or 6 different churches and just kind of do that because, or even women's ministries, different, uh, small groups and
Hmm.
that kind of, just say, and you can kind of lay it out this way too, don't come that you have to buy, but come please to just support me so
Or
I'm not there alone, so
yeah.
I can meet you, we can talk about my journey, your journey, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's what I would do now. But honestly, you being in a store benefits both of you because you
Mhm.
bring in traffic that the store wouldn't typically have. And so most of the time, most stores will do a book signing for free.
Right. Just to generate the traffic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. To get different people in their store that didn't know it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, well, and before I forget, I want to backtrack too and just go back to where you said you prayed over how many books to order and kind of throughout the whole process. And I definitely wish that was something that I was more faithful at when I first began my writing and publishing career. I don't know if it's the Gen X independent, my parents weren't really involved person in me. I mean, they were involved, they were around, but definitely we were the Gen Xers who were just kind of, left to follow the rules and do our own thing. So built a very independent streak. And so I have to remind myself, I've gotten a lot better about it, but just taking all of those little decisions to the Lord because He does care. And if He's called you to do something, I never had a dream of writing a book or becoming an author. And then after 7 years of college and working for three, we had our second child, and I was all of a sudden home. And I tell people, like, I got paid to talk to people. I was a counselor. I got to talk to adults all day long. And all of a sudden, I was in a house full of toddlers and infants. And so that's when I just started pouring out into words on paper. And then God built that into a passion for writing. I'm now, oh, I lose count. I really need to write them all down. Somewhere between 25 and 35 books at this point, between published and set to release. But a lot of that, I think I worked harder than I needed to and made some missteps along the way, like ordering too many books for different things and lugging boxes of books to different things because I wasn't laying all that before the Lord for that wisdom and discernment. So I love that you brought that piece in because as Christian authors, we need that reminder that God cares about even those little decisions. It's not just the book, it's not just what's in the book. It's how do we get that book into the hands that, he's prepared for us and what does that look like? And it's going to be different because you're going to hear a lot of different advice out there in the world, only order 40 books because, you don't want like I ended up with one of my original books. I did an event at a school and I'm like, okay, I'm going to order 150 books and I'm still selling those 150 books years later. But I didn't see godly wisdom for that through prayer. And you're going to get other people who say, oh gosh, I only ordered, 100 and I sold out. And so you definitely need to order more. So I love that reminder to really every step along the way to continue to just ask God, like lay it before him and say, okay, God, how many books do I order? Where do I do book signings? Who do I call? Where do I put my effort in? Because as we know, then we're energized by the activities that we're doing instead of drained by them because we're not working in our own effort. So I loved that you included that. And then just that God gave you the idea, like in the spot, at this moment to call churches, we are promoting his gospel and we're sharing books that, are meant to draw people to him or closer to him and get churches involved. And so a new idea of what you would do next time. And that makes me want to ask, is there anything you did with the launching of your first book that you wouldn't do again?
No, there'd be a lot of things that I would do.
Okay.
Like I was going to do a book, or I was going to do a book launch. My husband was
Mhm.
kind of, he's a little more reserved and he didn't think I should. My son, of course, he was all like, yes, you should. I finally had I had a friend that approached me and said that she had a new space in a town close to me, a bigger town close to me, and wanted to get more people into her space and said, let's do the book launch, let's do a book launch there, and you have a
Mhm.
reception and a party,
Yeah.
and I was nervous because my husband was nervous. And so it was like, well, who's going to come? Are you going to invite friends? That kind of thing. And then her daughter broke her arm and we didn't do it.
Oh,
So it didn't happen. But if I was to do it again, and the nice thing is, honestly, you can Google book launches and you can look at all different people and how they launch their books and that kind of thing. Listen, I didn't know that. I didn't even have social media when I started my book. Now,
okay.
the other thing I would do, there's a lot of things I do now. I've
Yeah,
I've learned so many things, but
that's what we're
I
here
would,
for.
I
Yeah.
would definitely be talking about my book on social media.
Mm.
If I would have had social media when I was writing, I would have been talking about it, getting people excited about it,
Mhm.
talking about my struggles, talking about how, oh, I spent, a whole afternoon pretty much deleting everything I did. If I did talk about how to write a book in my book,
Mhm.
because it was just one of those things that I really didn't know who would read it. Honestly, I could come up with maybe 10 people, and that was close family members. Of course, can't rely on that either.
Yeah.
Um, so it, I thought maybe I was just writing it for God. I really didn't know when I was writing it who I was writing it for. So I just kind of put, okay, if you're gonna write a book, don't do it this way. And I threw up some tidbits in my book along the way about my struggles, how Satan just totally, he would get a hold of me and say, "Who do you think you are to write a book? You don't have a clue as to what you're doing. Look how many times you erase stuff. You don't even know where to put a comma." It was I was bombarded
Yeah.
several times by Satan. Several times I put the book down and went, well, nobody knows I'm writing a book. And so it doesn't really matter if I finish this book or I don't finish this book. Although it was for God and, yes, but there's some things inside you that just say, well, he still loves me anyway. you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I did put it down several times, but honestly, if I was seriously deep into writing another book, I would be talking about it with people on the internet because you get encouragement. Plus,
Mhm.
they see how much struggle there is in writing a book, and then they kind of get invested in what you're doing, and they want to maybe be part of the project too.
Absolutely. It builds that excitement.
Yeah.
And I I've done some behind the scenes clips. And as you're talking, I'm like, yeah, I need to go back to that because I have a series releasing right now, and I did several videos for the first book, but the third book's already out, and the fourth one is due very in short order. And so, yeah, and I think that sometimes if we'll stop and reflect, we do learn more about what I would have done different, or I will do different next time, because I know that you're toying around with doing another book. And so having all those lessons. And I think that's really powerful for new authors, but also authors who may have one or two or three or more books out already. And, like me, when I first put my initial books out, I didn't have that information either. And I've learned a lot over the last 10 years of publishing about marketing and about making all those touch points. And so I'm sure that there's other authors that, are either starting and they can have this information and be prepared because really they say you need to plan your book launch for 4 to 6 months. That's hard to do when you have 10 books coming out in a year. I'm obviously not doing a book launch for each one of them. I am doing some book discussions, and then, trying to figure that out. But just to have that heads up, or maybe they had a book and they missed the book launch, but then you have all these other ideas that will help them get their book into readers' hands. So I
Right.
love that. Love that.
Well, I would definitely, for you, especially since it's a series,
Yeah.
I would just be putting teasers out there all the time.
Right.
Who is this person gonna, who
Yeah.
is this person gonna end up with? Is this person gonna survive? Is this, that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I'm good at it intermittently, I guess is the best way to put it.
oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so scheduling is my best friend for Facebook because it allows me to sit down and focus on that for an hour and then, go edit or go write, or I'm actually running for a local office right now. So that has taken over a pretty big portion of my life at this moment. But, I'm like, but I know God called me to that too. It was, I wouldn't have done it otherwise. And so, yes, and I think just this is why I have Kingdom Writers. And you've probably noticed I haven't been as active for the last month or so, and that's because the whole campaigning thing has taken a lot more time. But that's why I created it, so that authors can share what they've learned from what they've done right, what they haven't done right, what they've learned along the way, so that we can encourage and uplift each other. Because my dream is to see more and more biblically based Christian books, fiction and nonfiction, out there to help introduce people to God and then draw them closer. Like my fiction series, I'm like, well, it's fiction, but there's a lot of fiction readers out there, and I'm telling stories that show how people can how God works in their lives through the difficult, the challenges, even the tragedies. And so it's not just to entertain. I don't think as a Christian author, our goal can ever be just to entertain, but to reveal, different pieces of God's character we've learned along our own journeys and hopefully encourage others to rely on Him. And so that's why I love conversations like this too, because we've had very different journeys. And the Lord has taught us both different things to help get these messages to people. And I just love, your heart for sharing that with others, so that as they're coming up, they can hopefully learn from our mistakes and not make quite so
right,
many of their own. Because that's the intelligent way to learn is from other people's mistakes, and not even mistakes, just not knowing what you don't know. And I
right,
think, we can't rake ourselves over the coals for not knowing what we didn't know. We just
right,
press forward and go, well, I know now. So, I, know how to move forward now and then making that happen. So, all of that was super, super helpful. Um, and I'd love to transition to, you didn't expect to write a book. There was a lot of doubt and a lot of spiritual attack for obvious reasons because your book's very gospel centered and Satan probably knew that that would impact lives, not that he can see the future like the Lord does, but he's not necessarily dumb either. So when we're being faithful to the gospel, that's when he gets out his arsenal to try to stop us. So you did get it out. You started doing events and eventually started using social media. And I would love to know because you kind of said, I didn't even know who would read it. I was writing this for God and I just wanted to be faithful in that. But you have gotten your book out there. You have gotten, a good number of readers at this point. And so I would love to hear from you what has surprised you about the readers that you have gotten your book to.
Well, again, like I said, don't rely on family and friends. Uh,
Mhm.
they honestly, I have so many more strangers that have read my book than people I know. Matter of fact, people I know are still buying my book and still finishing it up. And it's been out for 3 years now. So it's
Fantastic.
like, okay, pace yourself, people. Pace yourself. You wouldn't want to pick up a book that you actually know the author and read. It just amazes me. I have a bookshelf of books to read, but if I meet another author and they want to swap books or whatever,
Yeah,
and I do that, I'm going to read the one of the person that I know versus reading a book from somebody that I don't know and will never ask me if I've read their book.
hmm,
Philip Yancey's never going to give me a call and say, "Hey, what do you think of this book?" But the other people will.
right.
And it's not something I always want to do. I had gentlemen reach out to me, and I really didn't want to read his book, and I really didn't want to swap books because I was like, it's just going to cost me money to ship it, to pay for my book, and I just really did. But I loved his book; it was so good, and I promoted it highly to several people because
Yeah.
it was a very good book. Um, it, don't rely on. I honestly, the biggest way I promote my book, we travel a lot, and
Mhm.
so we take it into small towns. You could try big towns, but honestly, they just have especially with Christian books. Bigger
Mm,
towns aren't as warm towards Christians as smaller towns are,
right.
and corporately, it's harder to get into a chain type of store than it is
Mhm.
if the owner's standing behind the cash register and she'll listen to your story.
Yeah.
So, and I look at it as a mission because I have given my book has my testimony in it, and that's the big part of the beginning of my book of how people rippled Jesus into my life through a baptism, a bold question, or a meal prayer, a baptism, a bold question, and some different little things along the way. And so I get to tell people this. So if they're not believers, I give a full blown gospel testimony and tell them about what Jesus did for me. He died, buried, rose again. So
Right. What a
I
great opportunity. Yeah.
well, yeah. So I figure it's a win-win either way. If they tell me no, I'm still giving them the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we take them with us when we travel, and we just go into all the small. I go into my husband drives, and
Yep.
I'm the salesperson, so I just go into the stores and I just say, "Hey, I'm Jennifer Godwin. I wrote this Christian book. I would love to get it into your store. I sell you for this amount. You sell for this amount. You get to be cheaper than Amazon. You don't have to order a large amount. I can hand them to you right now. And if you're interested, I'll tell you my story." And so then that's just kind of how I go about it. And I've gotten it all the way from Minnesota. I'm in Iowa. It's all the way from Minnesota down to Florida and back again and over to Ohio. But that's because that's where I was traveling to,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, we just take it along with us.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
there's
how,
something to say for just asking the question. because you
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
lost anything.
No, no,
Mm. Yeah.
you're still being obedient. And let me tell you, I've
Mhm.
met a lot of people along the way. And yeah, you're going to get a lot of no's, but it's fun getting those yeses, because then when they do that, I always say, thanks for going on mission with me, because they are doing mission with me. We're both doing mission work. We're both trying to get Jesus into people's hands. And
Mhm.
so,
Yeah. And do you ever hear from readers? Have you gotten feedback,
um,
either via email
oh
or
yeah, oh
Amazon
yeah, and
reviews?
messenger and that kind of thing. But the best
Okay.
one, I mean, I just leave my book laying around anywhere I can, like, listen, I have a cup that's got Go Make Ripples on it. It actually sold a book in the vehicle with my husband. I'm out trying to hustle my book in the town, and he's sitting in a public library parking lot when a
Hmm.
gentleman came up and saw the cup, and he was talking to him about his truck. But then he said, well, what's that cup? And my husband sold him a book sitting in the car from a cup. But
Love that.
I've
Yeah.
sold my book from wearing my sweatshirt that says Go Make Ripples and somebody
Mhm.
asking me about it. But like you, back to your question, the best one, I was sitting by a pool in an area where I do sell several books. Um, I, I had this store, she did, and this is another opportunity too, because I was in the area, the store was here, and, it was just, a block away. And I said, listen, let's do it for consignment. If you sell them, fine. If not, you're not out anything.
Yeah.
And she really didn't want to do it.
Mm.
But now she's one of those ones. I think she's probably sold over 150 of my books. And so now she's all about my book.
Yeah, that's a
It's making her,
win-win for
because it's
everybody.
making her money. But
Yeah.
so several books had sold in that area. So I have my book sitting there. I always leave my book out, because if somebody comes by and asks me a question about it, I can talk about it,
Hmm.
as I'm reading somebody else's book.
Yeah.
And this woman walked by and she says, oh, Go Make Ripples. She goes, oh, have you read that book before? She didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know
Yeah.
what? I am going to play dumb here for a minute and see what she says. And she went on and on. And I said, well, what did you like? Oh, I just loved it. I bought it for all my siblings. She said, this is a really good book. She gives you lots of ideas on how to spread the gospel. And she's just kind of funny and quirky. And, she went on and on. And so she said, and she noticed some of the ripples around the area
Yeah.
that she didn't know I was making the ripples, but she had noticed the ripples. She goes, and somebody else must have read this book, because there are some people that are making these ripples in our area. And I'm like, oh, really? And so when it got down, all of a sudden she looks at me and she goes, are you the author? And I said, well, yes. And I was going to tell you that, but I wanted to hear what you had to say unsolicited first. It was
Yeah.
so funny, but it was a present from God, is what it
Yes.
was. It was an encouragement from him.
Mhm.
You know, I couldn't have asked that woman to tell me all that information. God just happened to put her there just
Right.
at that moment.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
that's every author's dream is to spontaneously run into a reader who gushes about their book, and that's all
yeah,
just a huge blessing and encouragement.
but
And
we should ask for it too.
yeah.
Because when I'm down and I look at my boxes of books and I'm like,
Mm.
God, how am I, how, I always take it on myself. How am I going to get all these out there? And then finally, it dawns on me. He probably is, hello, it's not
Yeah.
on you, it's on me.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, we need to get these out here. This is on you. This is your plan. So you need to get
Mhm.
these out there. And I need a little bit of encouragement. And every time I ask for encouragement, he does send someone to say something about it.
That's
It's
great.
amazing, but we have to ask for it too.
Yeah.
If you want to hear what people think, or if you want to hear a word of encouragement, ask God, because he's a loving father that really wants to bless us that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that transitions us into our last question for today. Believe it or not, we're almost at 45 minutes, but I'm not gonna hit the stop button there. And this really kind of moves us. We are encouraged by those positive words, and we love hearing that our work has had, an effect on our readers. And as a Christian author, that is part of how we define success. But I would love to hear from you just more in general or other specific ways of how you would define success as a Christian author.
Well, I would define success as if somebody is actually putting, my book is all about Christians making ripples. It's about sharing Jesus with others in easy, simple ways. And I give lots of suggestions throughout my book. And that would be my idea of success if other people are out there making ripples to share the gospel with other people.
Mm,
And God has, again, graciously had people reach out and tell me, I used to not be able to do this. I had a friend, I still have a friend. Um, she is very reserved, very quiet. Well, she always told me, that's you, that's what you do. We can't all be like you.
mm,
And and my mother is nothing like me. I mean, she's very quiet and reserved. And so I wrote the book for people that are quiet and reserved. I give them lots of different ideas on how to spread the gospel without being loud and vocal like me.
yeah.
And she actually, I suggest about buying gospel tracts. And she had some construction going on in her house. They were doing a whole remodel job. And she read my book and she ordered some gospel tracts and started handing them out to all the workers as she gave them like little cookies. She'd give them a gospel tract and then maybe just say, well, you ought to give Jesus a thought and that kind of stuff. And she said she would have never done it had she not read my book. And even though she knew me personally,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
book just kind of spoke to her heart.
Mm,
I had another one reach out to me earlier this spring. Um, she had read my book and she really liked my book. And she was a stranger when this all first started. But she works in a police station as, I don't know, a secretary or, just comptroller or something there.
yeah,
And
some type of administrative. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so she wanted her church to put together a evening where all of the local EMTs, the first responders, the police officers were honored. And so she said, I would have never done that if I hadn't read your book. And so when I hear things like that, then that's success to me. It
Yeah.
isn't the numbers. I don't care about the numbers because I just got a picture of two books sitting on a shelf at a store in Midwest Iowa, and they're still sitting there. I know how many I sold of them, and they're still sitting there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many books you sell. It's when the books are in somebody's hands actually putting it to work. I
Yeah.
mean, I know how many books that I have read that I've applied what they've suggested into my own life. And,
Yeah.
whether it be fasting or different kind of ways to pray or how to spread the gospel in a different way. I know how many books have influenced my life. That's what
Yeah.
I want to do. I want to be able to influence somebody else's life to
Yeah.
expand the kingdom of God.
So it's
Because it's all
measured by that impact
mm-hmm,
able to make.
mm-hmm,
And again, I think it's good for people to remember, well, we all have stories. God doesn't call everyone to write them.
right.
Some people just share in their lives and in other ways. But when he calls us to put that down on paper, a lot of times it's very cathartic to write the story. I've talked to a lot of authors who want to share their story of redemption. And it's can be a difficult process depending on what the story is, and it is cathartic. And sometimes a lot of that process and that additional healing that comes through that
Hmm.
can be a measure of success. But then using that story to touch the people who will be impacted by your story, who may read another book and not be impacted, or another type an author with a different voice. And so I don't think there could ever be too many books in the world. I think there can be too many crummy books in the world,
Oh,
but
yes.
there absolutely can never be too many Christian, biblically based, God-centered books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction,
Hmm.
because those stories impact people's lives.
Right.
And I love that we get to focus on the, I mean, granted, most Christian authors would, again, like to make money off of their books. And it's shocking to people when I tell them how little per book. And then, it's a battle to get exposure.
Right.
And that's why all these pieces come together because, yeah, we would like to make money, but every book sale, every book that we pass on to someone else is an opportunity to impact a life and possibly more lives. How many lives were impacted by that one person choosing to go to her church and say, look, let's do an
Right.
emergency services appreciation day.
Right.
That's the people that are involved in those jobs, it's their families, it's their friends, it's the other church members. And so there's not necessarily a tangible, oh, I've, had this many readers, or I've sold this many books, or I've heard back from this many people. We probably won't know until the other side when we join the Lord in heaven what the impact was, if we'll even care at that point. But just that God's able to use it, and we're able to, and I keep that in the forefront of the stories that we write, that we can't just write stories for, again, entertainment or information, that it's really for that impact. Because as believers, if we're not impacting people in a positive way for the gospel, then we're wasting our time. And so I love how you highlighted that.
Well, it's the title of my book, Go Make
Yeah,
Ripples. I mean, that's what it is. It's about the ripples that go out and on and on and on.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I have had so much fun talking to you today. I'm glad we were able to do this. I know we'll keep up the conversation and talk more about marketing and talk more about your perspective next book that you are being led to work on. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what other impact God brings.
Me too. Me
Awesome.
too. It's
Well, thank
exciting.
you, Jennifer. And
Great.
for anybody watching this video, I will have all of Jennifer's links included in the notes for this interview. And I hope that you will go get her book and go make your own ripples. Until next time, we will see you then, and happy writing.